Hello, welcome back to Learn Oikonomia. In this video, we are going to answer what is the role of the deficit spending in fiscal policy. So, this question would be answered in this particular video. So, let's answer the question. We know that the government of any country would have two different tools to deal with economic scenario. That is public policy instruments. So, what are the public policy instruments or what are the fiscal policy instruments? These are taxation and government expenditure. But the government has to keep a balance between these two scenarios. That is, the government would be collecting taxes in various forms from people, from companies, etc. And also, the government would be spending a lot in the name of health expenditure, in the name of education expenditure. So apart from health and education expenditure, we know how the government is going for different expenditure patterns, right? So the point here is that the government should make sure that its revenue is enough to meet its expenditure. If its revenue is not enough to meet its expenditure, what the government does is that it goes for borrowing. And here comes the role of deficit spending. So, as a part of fiscal policy, we know the government would sometimes engage in deficit spending, and this is mainly to stimulate aggregate demand in the economy. If people have no money with them, what happens is that there won't be demand for commodities, there won't be production happening, there won't be enough employment opportunities. So, as a result, the economy would gradually move to a process of recession. So, ultimately, this recession will drive the economy to what is known as depression. So in order to curb these situations, or in order to, once a recession happens, what the government does is that the government would try its level best to uh, give a give a hand to the economy to come out of the problem of recession, so that the economy won't be driven to what is known as a depression. So the government would try to increase its spending so that people will get money from the government, so that they can go for spending. This would increase production, this would increase employment opportunities, so that this would help the economy to come up, right? So not all deficit spending is performed as a part of fiscal policy, and fiscal policy, as we all know, refers to the use of taxation, public spending, etc. by the government. And all fiscal policies promote at least, or try to promote growth, try to promote employment opportunities, and try to promote production in the economy. Fiscal policy is not always more specific and targeted in implementation compared to monetary policy. Coming to some examples, you can see that taxes are increased or taxes are reduced, and it depends upon the economic scenario. If the economy is facing the inflationary scenario, then the government would increase taxation. If the economy is in a recessionary phase, then the government would cut short tax rate. Government spending must be directed toward particular projects or goods, services, transfers, etc. In macroeconomic models, we could see that aggregate demand curve, it would shift right when the government increased its expenditure, and it would shift left when the government increased taxes. It would shift right when the government uh, reduced taxes, and it would shift left when the government reduces expenditure. Right. So, an increase in the aggregate demand is very much important, especially in a Keynesian economy. This is very much important, and the role of government has been very much emphasized by Keynes in his famous work, General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. When classical economists has criticized the role of government, or when they told that economy is self-sustaining and it could be self-regulating, uh, the Great Depression of 1930s has taught a lesson to the classical economists. As a result, what Keynes has done is that he has come up with a solution to the Great Depression, and he told that it was effective lack of effective demand that create all the problems, and in order to deal with lack of effective demand, or uh, uh, the what to say, lack of efficient growth rate in effective demand, we should go for fiscal policies. The government should come forward and make investment in the economy whenever the private parties fail to do so. How does deficit spending in a fiscal policy work? This is very much important. When the government wants to stimulate the economy, it actually goes for a surplus budget. The surplus budget means that it actually involves more spending compared to the revenue earned by the government. In deficit spending, it is distinguishable from other forms of government spending. Here, the government is going for borrowing because it knows that its revenue is not sufficient enough to meet its expenditure, and in order to deal with its revenue commitments, what the government does is that it goes for borrowing. However, we can see that on a macroeconomic scale, deficit spending would poses a lot of problems, because if the government goes on or keeping, if the government keeps on borrowing, then what the government would face is a debt trap. This is something which could be seen not only with respect to individuals, but also the government could face the same. So the government, if it goes for borrowing, also it could create a situation of inflation in the economy. So the government knows where to stop. Till that point the government can go, but after that point the government knows if it goes beyond this point, there would be problems. So the government at this particular point would stop spending. But it is very much important for the growth and welfare of the people. The government should spend. So Keynesian economists, they argue that deficit spending would not cause crowding out. We know what crowding out is. It means that if the government goes on spending, it would what, discourage private investment. That is what is crowding out means. But Keynes says that no, it won't happen. If the government increases spending, or if the government goes for deficit spending, it doesn't lead to crowding out, especially in a liquidity trap situation. Neoclassical as well as Austrian economists, they argue that even if nominal interest rate do not rise, when the government flood the credit market with their debts, the business as well as institutions that purchase these bonds from government would still take money out of the private sector. So they argue that private use of money is more productive than public use. Keynesian economists, they had attacked this particular point that by telling that extra income is created with every additional dollar of government spending. Or if the in terms of rupee, we could see that this would have a multiplier effect. For every single rupee that the government is spending on the economy would have a multiplier effect. And thus, deficit spending would theoretically be more productive than private investment. This is the argument put forward by Keynes and his followers. We can see that there is still plenty of debate about the efficacy of multiplier effect and also its size. Many economists argue that fiscal policy has lost its effectiveness, and this is actually now this is actually facing problems in today's world. Deficit spending would have diminishing marginal returns if government consistently runs budget deficit. That is very important to look into. And we have seen that importance of deficit spending by the government and how the government does it, and also the problems related to deficit spending by the government. That's all for today. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel for more videos, and you can be a part of my Telegram channel and Telegram group to discuss your doubts. I'll be providing the links of these in the description box. You can join from there. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.